Name's Harvey. I'm 34. Average height, dark hair, brown eyes. Just a regular guy. Nothing crazy. I mean, I'm not ugly, but I'm not exactly the cover model for Men's Health either. And you know what? I never thought it mattered. My wife, Greta, used to agree. Or at least I thought she did. We've been married for about 5 years. Life was pretty solid. Career moving up, decent savings, a house, and lots of plans for the future. Greta, though, she's one of those women who turns heads. Blonde hair, sharp blue eyes, tall and elegant. People notice her when she walks into a room. She never cared about that stuff much, though, or at least I never saw any signs of it. Anyway, things started going sideways at a friend's birthday party. It was one of those chill get-togethers with too much wine and conversations that turn weird late into the night. We were all sitting around in a circle talking about dreams, goals, and future kids. You know, that kind of thing. That's when Greta said it. "I'd want my kid to be from another man," she blurted out almost casually. The room froze for a second, and my brain did a double take. Did she just say what I think she said? Before I could even process it, Greta waved her hand and laughed nervously. "Oh, I didn't mean it like that. I was just joking. Like, imagine if we had a kid with Scandinavian genes, blonde hair, blue eyes. He'd probably grow up looking like a supermodel, right?" A few people chuckled awkwardly, trying to play it off, but I saw the raised eyebrows. Even I didn't know how to react at first. So I went the easy route and joked back. "Sure, and while we're at it, let's throw in some Viking strength too," I said, grinning. Everyone laughed, and the moment passed. But it stuck with me. It was one of those weird comments you brush off at first, thinking, hey, just a drunk slip-up. But later, lying in bed that night, it kept replaying in my head. Why the hell would she even say something like that? I didn't know it yet, but that was just the beginning. I thought it was a random offhand joke. Turns out I was about to face the full storm of her twisted ideas. The next few days were off. Greta kept bringing up weird comments about genetics and physical traits, little things that seemed harmless on the surface but kept adding up. We'd be watching TV and she'd say stuff like, "Look at that actor's jawline. You think it's all genetics, or does he work out 20 hours a week?" Or, "Wow, those eyes. Imagine having a kid with eyes like that." At first, I just shrugged it off. Whatever, right? People talk about celebrities. But it wasn't just celebrities. It was random people too. Like we were at the grocery store and she whispered, "That guy's probably over 6 feet tall. I wonder if he's Scandinavian or something. They're always tall." I laughed awkwardly. "What's with you and Scandinavians lately?" Greta smirked but didn't really answer. I tried not to think much of it. People go through phases, right? Like how someone might get obsessed with fitness for a while or binge-watch documentaries on ancient aliens. But this was different. One evening, we were having dinner, and she casually mentioned that she'd been reading up on genetics. Apparently, she found some blog or TikTok influencer talking about optimal gene combinations and passing on superior traits. I almost choked on my pasta. "Superior traits? Are you serious right now?" I asked, giving her a skeptical look. She didn't even blink. "Yeah, it's fascinating. There's research showing that people with certain features have better chances of success in life. You know, like taller men earning more money or people with symmetrical faces being perceived as more trustworthy." I stared at her. "Okay, but why does that matter to us? I mean, I'm pretty sure we're doing fine without all that genetic superiority crap." She sighed like I was missing some deep philosophical truth. "Harvey, I just want the best for our future kids. Don't you?" At that moment, I didn't know whether to laugh or argue. I settled for neither and changed the subject. But deep down, something didn't sit right. The way she talked about it, so matter-of-factly, it was starting to freak me out. A few weeks later, things escalated. Greta became obsessed. She spent hours scrolling through social media, watching interviews with so-called genetic experts, and reading up on inheritance patterns. She even started digging into her own ancestry, talking about how her family had roots in Scandinavia. One night, she hit me with another bombshell while we were watching a movie. Out of nowhere, she said, "I've been thinking, we should seriously consider how genetics will shape our kids' future." "Greta, what the hell are you talking about?" I asked, putting down the remote. "I'm just saying," she replied, like this was the most normal conversation in the world. "We need to be strategic. If our kids are going to have every advantage in life, we should aim for the best gene pool possible." "You're acting like we're breeding racehorses," I shot back. "What's gotten into you?" She crossed her arms and gave me that, "you just don't get it" look. "Harvey, this isn't about you. It's about giving our kids the best start. People with strong genetics have a head start in life." I felt my stomach twist. "Are you trying to say my genes aren't good enough?" Her eyes widened in surprise, like she hadn't thought of how messed up that sounded. "No, I mean, you're handsome, responsible, and smart. It's not about you, but you know how competitive the world is. I'm just worried." "Worried about what?" I demanded. "That our kids won't be tall enough to play pro basketball? That they won't be genetically engineered supermodels?" Greta didn't answer right away. She just looked at me like she was weighing her words carefully. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't something she was going to snap out of after a few blog posts and YouTube videos. She was dead serious. That night, I lay awake next to her, staring at the ceiling. I had no idea how to deal with this. How do you reason with someone who's convinced your future kids need to look like they just stepped off the runway in Milan? Things were starting to spiral, and I was stuck in the middle of it. The next few weeks were hell. Greta's obsession went from subtle to full-on crazy. Every conversation somehow circled back to genetics. I couldn't even enjoy a simple walk in the park without her commenting on random people. "Look at that family," she said one day, nodding toward a tall, blonde couple pushing a stroller. "Bet their kids will grow up to be athletes or CEOs." I rolled my eyes. "Yeah, because eye color totally determines success." She ignored my sarcasm, staring at them like she was analyzing a science experiment. It wasn't just the comments anymore. Greta was colder, distant. She stopped showing affection like she used to. The woman who once used to cuddle with me during movie nights now acted like I was invisible half the time. And when she wasn't ignoring me, she was throwing passive-aggressive jabs. One night we were arguing about something trivial, what to order for dinner, I think, when she snapped. "Maybe if you weren't so average, you'd understand how important this is." I froze. "Excuse me? Average? Is that what you think of me now?" She bit her lip, realizing she'd gone too far, but it was already out there. "Harvey, I didn't mean it like that. You know what I'm trying to say." "No, I really don't," I shot back, my voice rising. "Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you regret marrying someone who's not a 6-foot-tall Nordic god." She sighed and crossed her arms. I'm scared, okay? Scared that our kids won't have the same opportunities other people's kids will. Life is hard enough as it is." "That's bullshit, Greta. Our kids will have love, support, and everything they need. But you're stuck on this delusional idea that genetics are a golden ticket to success." The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. She didn't say anything else that night, but I could tell she wasn't letting go of this fantasy. And me? I was stuck between wanting to shake some sense into her and just walking out the door. It only got worse from there. Greta started pulling away emotionally, like she'd already written me off as genetically unfit. She threw around more statistics like it was gospel. How taller men supposedly make more money. How symmetrical faces were linked to higher trust levels. It was exhausting. I confronted her one evening. "Let me get this straight. You think I'm not good enough to be the father of your kids because I'm not tall and blonde? Why the hell did you even marry me, Greta?" She hesitated, her face softening for a moment. "Harvey, that's not what I'm saying. You're a good man. You're reliable, and I love you. But this isn't about us. It's about our future." "Wow. So I'm good enough to be your husband, but not good enough to father your children. Got it. I shook my head, anger bubbling inside me. You're out of your mind. That night, I didn't bother sleeping next to her. I stayed on the couch, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out where the hell everything went wrong. This wasn't the woman I married. The woman I married didn't care about superficial crap like this. Now, it was like I was living with a stranger. The thought crossed my mind for the first time. Maybe this was the beginning of the end. Maybe there was no coming back from this. Before you find out what happens next, please subscribe to the channel. Greta wasn't even hiding her obsession anymore. She kept talking about perfect genes, like it was a casual topic of conversation. One night, she took it to a whole new level. We were sitting in the living room, barely talking. I was flipping through channels, trying to avoid any deep conversations, when she suddenly spoke. "Harvey, I've been thinking," she started, her tone way too calm for my liking. Oh, great. Here we go again. I muted the TV and turned to her. Thinking about what? She hesitated for a moment, then dropped the bomb. Maybe we should look into sperm donation, from someone with ideal traits. I blinked, not sure I'd heard her right. What the hell did you just say? Don't get upset, she said quickly, like she knew exactly how insane it sounded. I'm just suggesting we explore all our options. I could feel the blood rushing to my face. I stood up, pacing around the room. Options? You mean have some random guy's DNA in our child instead of mine? Are you hearing yourself right now? Harvey, calm down, she said, as if I was the one being irrational. It's not like I'm saying I want to sleep with someone else. It's just a medical procedure. Oh, well, that makes it so much better, I snapped, throwing up my hands. Thanks for clarifying, Greta. I feel so much more secure knowing you want a designer baby instead of one with my so-called inferior genes. She crossed her arms, frustration etched on her face. You're twisting my words. You refuse to understand where I'm coming from. No, I understand just fine, I said, glaring at her. You've decided that I'm not good enough, that our future kids need to be genetically upgraded because you can't stand the idea of them looking like me. She rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic. Dramatic? I let out a bitter laugh. You've spent months obsessing over this bullshit, Greta. You've compared me to tall blonde strangers and thrown statistics in my face. And now you're suggesting I get replaced by a goddamn sperm donor. If anyone's being dramatic, it's you. She stood up too, meeting my gaze. I'm not trying to hurt you, Harvey. I just want to make sure our children have the best opportunities. Why can't you see that? Because you've lost your mind, I shouted. You've let this fantasy take over your life, and you don't even realize how much damage you're doing. Do you even care how I feel? Her face softened for a moment, but the damage was already done. I couldn't unhear what she'd said. That night, I couldn't stand being in the same house with her. I needed space. I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, leaving her standing in the living room. I drove aimlessly for a while, my mind racing. This wasn't just some petty argument. This was a fundamental crack in our marriage, one I wasn't sure we could ever fix. When I got home a few hours later, Greta was waiting for me. She looked exhausted, but her expression was unreadable. Are you going to stay out all night from now on? She asked quietly. I'm thinking about it, I replied coldly. I walked past her without another word and went straight to the spare bedroom. I was done. Done with the conversations, the statistics, the cold looks. Done with feeling like I wasn't enough. The next few days were tense and silent. We barely spoke to each other. I could tell Greta was confused, maybe even hurt, but I didn't care anymore. I was mentally checked out. Every time I saw her, all I could think about was that damn conversation. The idea that she could even consider a sperm donor was like a slap in the face. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep living like this. The decision was made, even if it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. It was only a matter of time before things exploded again. Greta, of course, didn't seem to get just how far she'd pushed me. She thought this was just another bump in the road. But for me, this was the cliff. I'd already fallen, and there was no climbing back up. One night, after another stretch of cold silence, she tried to revisit the conversation. We were sitting at the dining table, both eating in near total silence, when she finally spoke. I think we need to be practical about this, Harvey, she said softly, almost like she was trying to avoid setting me off. I put my fork down and stared at her. Practical about what exactly? She sighed and rubbed her temples like I was the difficult one. About children. About how we move forward. I know you hate the idea of sperm donation, so I've been looking into other options. My stomach dropped. What kind of options? Calm down, she said quickly. I'm just talking hypothetically. I was reading about how some couples use surrogates, or they meet people who are willing to help, in non-traditional ways. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. Non-traditional ways? You mean finding some guy to— No! She cut me off, shaking her head. Of course not. I'm not suggesting I'd cheat or anything like that, but it's not uncommon for people to explore alternatives. You have to admit, it's something worth discussing. Greta, are you seriously sitting here at this table telling me that we should meet someone to make a baby? What the actual hell is wrong with you? I couldn't even believe the words coming out of her mouth. She hesitated, probably realizing just how insane she sounded. Then she gave a nervous laugh and waved her hand, as if to erase what she'd just said. You're overreacting. It was just a thought. Oh, just a thought. I stood up, glaring down at her. You think I'm going to sit here and listen to you casually brainstorm ways to replace me as the father of our kids? Jesus, Greta, I'm done. Harvey, wait, she said, her eyes widening in shock. You don't mean that. I do, I said, my voice low but firm. I've been done for a while. You've driven me to my breaking point with this genetic fantasy bullshit. I don't even recognize you anymore. Harvey, come on, she pleaded, standing up and moving toward me. You can't just walk away over a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, I snapped. You've been chipping away at me for months, making me feel like I'm not good enough, like I'm some defective placeholder for your dream man, and now you want to talk about alternatives? Screw that. I'm done being your experiment. Don't you think you're being selfish? She fired back, her tone sharp. You're making this all about your feelings instead of thinking about our future family. I laughed bitterly. Oh, I'm selfish? That's rich. Coming from the person who wants to Frankenstein her ideal child together from a sperm bank catalog? Her face hardened. You're impossible. And you're delusional, I shot back. Enjoy your perfect future, Greta, but it won't be with me. That night, I packed a bag and walked out the door. Greta followed me to the front steps, her voice trembling with disbelief. Harvey, wait. You don't have to do this. Let's talk. I'm done talking, I cut her off, not even turning around. All you care about is your fantasy of a perfect family. Well, newsflash, Greta. There's no such thing. You've destroyed what we had chasing something that doesn't exist. I got in the car and drove off without another word. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be there anymore. A few hours later, she called. I let it ring a couple of times before answering. What do you want? I asked flatly. Where are you? She asked softly. Are you coming home? No, Greta, I'm not coming home, I said with finality. I need space. I need time to think. And honestly, you should do the same. Harvey. I don't understand why you're so angry. I thought we were having a rational conversation, she said, her voice full of confusion. Jesus Christ, Greta, I groaned. You still don't get it, do you? You've been tearing me down for months, comparing me to some fantasy man in your head, making me feel like I'm not enough. How the hell can you not see how damaging that is? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then she whispered, I didn't mean to hurt you. Well, you did, I replied, my voice like ice. Look, I'm done arguing. We're not on the same page anymore. Hell, we're not even in the same book. That was the last real conversation we had. The next day, I called a lawyer. Greta was still in shock, I think. She didn't fight the divorce much, probably because she was too busy convincing herself that I was the one who lost my mind. But in reality, I was finally taking control of my life again. The divorce process moved fast. Too fast, maybe. Greta barely put up a fight. She didn't even try to drag things out or complicate the division of assets. It was like she couldn't comprehend that it was really happening. Meanwhile, I was laser-focused. Meetings with my lawyer, getting my own bank account sorted, finding a new place to stay. She tried reaching out once or twice, but it was awkward and pointless. The last time she called, she said, "Harvey, I think you're overreacting. Maybe you're just stressed out from everything going on. We can figure this out together." I almost laughed at how delusional that sounded. "Greta, I'm not stressed," I told her. "I'm done. We're too far gone. You've made it crystal clear that I'm not part of your plan anymore, and I can't be married to someone who thinks I'm just a genetic liability." She fell silent after that. No arguments, no apologies, just silence. Maybe she was finally realizing how deep this cut ran. The divorce was finalized quietly. Our friends and family started hearing bits and pieces, and the questions came rolling in. "What happened between you two? Is it true you're splitting up?" I didn't give them many details. I wasn't about to tell them about Greta's obsession with designer babies. Let her deal with that embarrassment herself. Greta, on the other hand, didn't handle the social fallout as smoothly as she probably expected. I heard through mutual friends that people were subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, criticizing her. One guy joked at a party, "Well, now you're free to find that Viking you've been dreaming about." Apparently, she didn't take that well. Good. Maybe it was time for her to face some reality. Life after divorce is weird. There's no other word for it. You get used to having someone around all the time, and suddenly it's just you. I moved into a small apartment, something temporary until I figured out my next steps. I tried to stay busy, hiking, hitting the gym, hanging out with friends who didn't want to talk about Greta. I wasn't interested in dating. Hell, I barely had the energy to think about relationships. I needed to rebuild myself first. Some nights were rough, though. Lying awake at 2 a.m., my mind would wander back to all the arguments, all the insane conversations. I'd question everything. Could I have handled it differently? Did I overreact? But deep down, I knew the truth. Greta wasn't the same woman I married. She had let this toxic obsession consume her, and there was no way I could have saved her from that. As for Greta, I heard she wasn't doing so great either. She apparently threw herself into work and became a bit of a recluse. The social butterfly everyone knew had clipped her own wings. Maybe she was realizing that chasing perfection isn't all it's cracked up to be. She tried to reach out a couple more times, sent me a couple of texts like, "Hey, can we talk?" and "I've been thinking about everything." I never replied. I wasn't going back. I wasn't going to reopen wounds that were finally starting to heal. Sometimes I wonder if she ever truly gets it, how much she hurt me, how much damage her words did. But it's not my responsibility anymore. I'm moving forward, one step at a time, and honestly, I feel lighter, free. No more twisted expectations, no more feeling like I had to compete with some fantasy version of perfection. It's just me now, and that's more than enough. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel. I wish you a great mood and good luck.